Everybody, and welcome. My name is Amy Hanratty, and I'm a professor of special education at California State University, Northridge. Today, we wanted to share some quick ideas and strategies related to strategic participation in online class meetings for students with significant support needs. My co-presenters are members of a distance learning community of practice focused on serving the needs of students with more significant disabilities. And we developed this together with Adi Buczynski, Samantha Taves, Jennifer Seelan, and myself. And our presenters will each introduce themselves as we go through. So to start off, we wanted to just kind of give an overview of some of the core ideas that we were starting with when we put together these strategies. So first of all, when we're talking about students with significant support needs, we know that these students benefit from general education and that inclusive practices are still essential even when we're doing distance learning. We know that these students are those that are most at risk for being excluded from general education settings and activities, and we're concerned that that risk of exclusion might become more likely in a distance learning scenario. So we really want to work on counteracting that. So we have over 30 years of research that demonstrates that all students benefit from access to the core curriculum when they're given supports and adjustments when needed. So here we're going to talk about some of those really specific supports and adjustments that relate to online class meetings in distance learning. We also know that inclusion in live sessions like Zoom or Google Meet sessions together with general education peers promotes that sense of belonging, that we're all doing this together. We're creating some shared experiences that students can build on, and we're really helping to maintain or sustain those connections between individual students with more significant needs and their teachers and peers. So let's go a little bit deeper into the whys of strategic participation. So in those online class meetings, we know that there tend to be some barriers for students with significant support needs. As we've talked to families and teachers who have been working through how these students can participate in class meetings since we started distance learning last spring, we hear stories about online classes moving quickly. Teachers are often worried about engagement. They don't want to have a lot of downtime. And that means that we tend to have a lot of teacher-directed instruction. And when we have student opportunities for participation, sometimes those opportunities happen fast. That makes really direct prompting or wait time that students with more significant needs might need in a typical learning scenario a little bit less feasible, because things are happening so quickly. We also know that student responses might rely really heavily on language, both language input and language output. So teachers might rely heavily on verbal speech in explaining directions, giving input. They might do a lot of text, like on the slide right now, a lot of text-based content. And it also might rely heavily on things like motor skills. So students need to be able to click or drag something on the screen or type something into the chat. That works really well for a lot of students, but for students with significant support needs who might respond in more subtle ways through nonverbal communication, or they might have speech that might be difficult to decipher in this format, then it might be harder for them to participate. And then finally, we know that some of these students have significant support needs. That means that they might need to rely heavily on support from a caregiver, and those caregivers really have a lot of variability in terms of their confidence in providing support to students. So those are some of the challenges or the barriers. And then we also know that there are these strategies that have a long history of being successful in-person general education classes for students with more significant needs. One of those is embedded instruction. So this is the idea of providing consistent practice of specific skills within a meaningful context. Another is just simple participation strategies to promote that belonging and class membership. And then finally, we want to make sure that students with significant support needs are not participating only passively or being the recipients of support, but also that those students have an opportunity to be seen as leaders and contributors to class instruction. We know that those opportunities really promote self-determination and also help to raise expectations for those students and help them to be seen as more capable. So just a few features that we want to look for in designing participation strategies for these students. So one, we want to make sure that they're predictable so that students and their caregivers can anticipate how they will participate and when they'll participate. They should contribute to the whole class lesson or activity and not take away from it. They should be strategies that the student wants to engage in. So it should be something that is of high interest to them and that builds on their strengths. The skills that we're targeting should be consistent with whatever individual skills the student is working on in their IEP. And all of those skills we know should be promoting long-term quality of life for the student. So, not skills that won't have relevance down the line. Because belonging is one of the key goals of these strategies, we want to make sure that that we're promoting belonging in using these strategies, connecting again to IEP goals. We want to make sure that the strategies that we're embedding are respectful or not stigmatizing to the learner. Sometimes that takes a little bit of trial and error too to make sure that the way in which we're encouraging the students' participation feels respectful to everybody involved. And then finally, of course, we need to consider any of the students' unique needs related to accessibility. So thinking about their motor skills, vision, hearing, and communication skills.
Hi, my name is Adi Buchinsky. I am a special education teacher at Chime Charter School, which is a fully inclusive school in Southern California. And I'm going to talk through some very concrete strategies you can implement tomorrow. So one strategy we could implement is having the student the responsible party for taking attendance. That could look like providing the student a hard copy attendance document with photos of their peers printed on it, and students might check off who is present or absent. They might circle students' names. There might be a word present or absent that they need to select depending on the student's needs and goals. Or this could take a digital format where the student's submitting a Google form with pictures of the students and they're checking off who is present or who is not. And when a student is working on that, some possible IEP goals that could relate are social skills, so learning peers' names, especially at this early point in the school year. There could be some letter recognition practice embedded in the students' names and how they're formatted. The student might be working on alphabetizing peers to learn the sequencing of the alphabet. They might need to number the peers, how many students are present or absent, to work on some embedded number practice. They could create subtraction problems out of the number of students in the class minus the number of students who are absent, and they could be charting that information over time. This is a great opportunity to complete a job, so working on pre-vocational skills, and a lot of fine motor skills embedded in whatever marking technique or clicking technique is being utilized to submit attendance. Another strategy might be selecting a brain break or a movement-based activity for the whole class to complete. So those long Zoom sessions, you want to break them up as a teacher, have the kids up and moving. So the student that you're focusing on with significant support needs might be the one who's making that selection. So the target student could make that selection in a variety of ways. There might be picture cards, or there might be popsicle sticks that indicate which brain break, and you would provide that to students in advance, or the choices might be provided digitally via communication board, or their own personal communication tool. This is a great opportunity for a student with significant support needs to be included in that classroom environment. The brain breaks are highly motivating for all the students. So to put your student with significant support needs front and center, they're the one making the choice about our activity, puts them in a really positive light with their typically developing peers. And there could be a number of skills that you incorporate in these activities. The student might be targeting some math skills. They might be counting out the number of options to work on one-to-one correspondence. There might be 2 containers of brain breaks, the ones we haven't done yet this week and the ones we've already done, and student can create some number sentences using those, or make some comparison judgments based on which has more and less. The student could also take a poll on how many students in the class liked that brain break when it was done. So they're counting peers' hands and noting that somehow on a tracking sheet. The student might be responsible for a timer or a clock to calculate how long we're going to do the break for. So setting the timer and notifying students when the time has elapsed. Again, we can embed letter recognition practice into the format of the brain break choices. And there's some social communication involved as well. The student might hold up the brain break choice and then select a peer to read it out loud to the rest of the class. So a lot of different skills you can incorporate. You're not going to incorporate all of them all at the same time, but these are just some options of ways to make it meaningful for a student's individual program. And we can also prime students for participation. This is a great strategy in brick and mortar schools and in our digital platform. So what it looks like is having the accessible options provided to students in advance and a warning provided from the staff of what's coming next. So that might look like some of these examples at the bottom. Charlie, I need you to get your color folder ready on your device so that you're ready to answer the next question. Then you continue on with the instruction. Okay, Charlie, we're ready for you to select the color as it pertains to the lesson, so that the student has some lead time to prepare for answering the question. It allows instruction to move more quickly, and it avoids the student feeling on the spot that they might need to come up with their answer right now when it might be a time-consuming process for them. The teacher or para, whatever staff member is involved, service provider, anybody, could privately communicate using a separate channel. So you might have a Zoom lesson and then a Google Voice call happening on the side, or a private chat in Zoom to the caregiver who's supporting the student, to say either in advance, a day or so in advance, hey, parent, caregiver, can you please pre-read chapter 5 with Ava so she's prepared for tomorrow's Zoom? Or it might be live while you're teaching, sending a private chat. Hey, Desi, I'm going to call on you for number 8, so get your answer ready. When you as the instructor might still be on number 3. It allows the student time to prepare. When we get to number 8, Desi's ready to go with his answer. So some skills we could incorporate there are, again, a wide range. The student needs to engage in listening and receptive communication skills, knowing when it's their turn. There's literacy involved, either in the task or just in the mode of communication. There can be vocabulary instruction embedded, math instruction embedded, and the student is engaging in self-determination. So they're choosing how they're going to participate, getting their answer ready to either read aloud or hold it up to share with the class.
Hi everybody, I'm Sammy Taves and I am a professor of special education at California State University Northridge. And I'll be talking a little bit about some curricular strategies to embed participation and learning of content within whole group or small group Zoom meetings during distance learning. So this first strategy is embedding repeated sentences or repeated big ideas within your content. And what that might look like is creating a PowerPoint and having an introduction slide that introduces or summarizes the big idea, but then including that summary sentence or repeated sentence on multiple slides throughout the presentation, or if students are reading a digital book together or alone, having that summary sentence pasted at the top or somewhere in the book so that students can see that. So down here in the picture, in the right-hand corner, you can see an example of what a book might look like with a repetitive sentence and a summary sentence. So you can think about using colors to make these repetitive sentences predictable. So a repetitive sentence or the main idea could be blue. And come up on every page. So in this example, the colonists were scared to fight the strong British Army would come up on every page to remind students that that's what this chapter is about. And the sentence, the yellow sentence, could be the summary of this page. And it says the colonists fight the British. So this is one way to provide repeated opportunities for students to practice with the same content. And so possible skills to target with this is identification of the main idea. So because students are getting extra experience and practice hearing that sentence or reading it themselves, that's more opportunities to learn that and commit that main idea to memory. Again, another skill to target is repetitive reading practice. So once the student has seen this sentence a few times, heard it read aloud, maybe they're going to be reading it aloud. You might decide to write this repetitive sentence at the student's independent reading level, or have this sentence include words you know that student can read on their own so that they're reading it out loud to the class when it comes up. And then the next one thing I wanted to say about these pictures at the bottom is maybe you're providing the student with a switch to read that repetitive sentence aloud to the class. So going back to talking about creating opportunities for participation in the whole group lesson by providing that switch or that repetitive sentence, you might be providing opportunities for the student to read out loud to the group. And lastly, that can raise confidence in reading. So there's a lot of research that shows that repetitive reading can really raise students' confidence and interest in reading because they feel the success of reading something that is that they know and are comfortable with. So that is one strategy that you can think about using. Another strategy is embedding, this says embedding literacy practice, but this could really be this strategy of highlighting and bolding content can really be used across different content areas. So you might be highlighting specific words or letter sounds that you want a student to read out loud while you're doing a whole group PowerPoint, or this can be used in content that you're giving small groups to work together. So let's say these are the notes that students are reading in a small breakout room, and the peers in that group know that Johnny is going to read the yellow words, and they're going to ask Johnny, what is the letter sound of the red letters? So these are strategies to plan participation into your whole group instruction, or even small group instruction or peer work. And you can think about how you might use this in math too. Could be for reading numbers or knowing, for a student knowing what problem that they need to complete on their own. These are also great strategies to explain to parents so that parents know, oh, okay, when this yellow word comes up, I know I'm going to ask my son or daughter to read this or to engage with this content specifically. So possible skills to target with this strategy are sight word or phrase reading that is pre-planned, initial, middle, or end letter sounds, number reading, and again, planned participation opportunities. One other strategy I wanted to talk about, which is a low time commitment but high potential for use strategy, is creating kind of a picture board of your content for the day. This could be applied to novels or books. It could be also applied to science or social studies content. And the basis behind it is you're looking at the content for the day and creating a timeline of what's happening in that content with pictures. So the example here I have here at the bottom is from a book called By the Great Horn Spoon, which is often read in 4th grade. At least in California. And so in this chapter of the book, the miners arrive at Hangtown Creek, they check into a hotel, they write letters to their family members, and then they go out panning for gold. And so one way to use these pictures, and each of those pictures that I just explained is numbered in the order that they happen. So ways you can use this is for whole group comprehension support, because it is a clear trajectory of the chapter, but it can also be used for a range of small group discussion activities. You could give each of these pictures to a small group of students, send them to a breakout room and say, come up with an idea about what you think is going to happen in the chapter today, just based on these pictures before they've read the chapter. Or you could do something similar with having students create a summary or a sequencing activity. But specifically for students with extensive support needs, this really can be used to support all of these things too, to support sequencing, summarization, having response options ready to go for a variety of conversations about the content. So if all students have access to these on the course content for the day, all students can use them, but you've got pictures ready for students with extensive support needs to participate in answering questions during whole group or small group instruction, or to engage in a variety of literacy IEP goals that they might have for summarization, sequencing, and answering questions.
Another strategy that you might use is incorporating a student with significant support needs as the individual who's reading a question or problem aloud to the class. So while solving the problem or answering the question might be too challenging for a student at that moment, they can be the one who presents it to the class. So that could look like, hey, Leo, let the group know what math problem we're going to work on next, or it's time to practice editing. Sophia, can you read the first sentence for us so that we can get started? Or Alex is going to let us know the main idea for today's science activity, incorporating the strategy that Sammy just shared with you. So some possible skills to target in that fashion are students' reading skills, their language and articulation skills. So this might be a great way to collaborate with the speech language pathology team. The student might be working on identifying numbers. And again, it has them in the center of the class. All eyes are on them. They're participating in a meaningful way while also working on their own individual skills. The student might be the responsible taskmaster in the class. So what that might look like is a teacher provides a hard copy schedule to the individual, and they're checking off as the lesson progresses. That might be something the teacher emails out the evening before. Caregiver prints it out and puts it in a sheet protector for the day, and the student can hold everyone accountable. So they might have something that looks like this. 1, warm up, 2, math video, 3, practice problems, 4, question and answer. So the teacher could say, okay, we're all done with our first step, warm up. Can you check that off and let us know what's next? And then the student could hold up the chart and say, number 2 is a math video. Great, now we're all gonna watch the math video together. Another example on the right-hand side just has some different language options depending on the skills you want to incorporate for the student. So some possible skills you might be targeting in this way are number identification, as in the example on the left, handwriting and fine motor control, depending on how the student is marking. They might be crossing off if they have a line writing goal, or they might be making a check mark or circling or blacking out depending on their fine motor abilities. They're practicing reading skills, and you would want to make sure that the text was at an appropriate reading level for them so they can be successful in reading it with their peers. And introducing sequential language, that would be the example on the right. Words like first, then, next, and last are really easy to incorporate in this strategy. Another strategy is if you have a class token economy system, you could ask the student with significant support needs to be the responsible party for managing that system. So what that looks like is classroom staff is assigning points or marbles or dollars, depending on how the system works, to groups of students or to the class as the whole, and the student with significant support needs is the person who's marking that down. So if there's a Jeopardy game happening, they might be tallying which team has earned how many dollars. If there's a class marble jar, they might be practicing a fine motor goal of marking circles and adding those up at the end to see how many marbles we earned today. Or if there's a teachers versus students game, who's gonna get more problems right, the student can work on tallying, counting. So skills you can incorporate here are addition. There could be number writing involved, reading of numbers, and again, fine motor and writing tasks as well.
Okay, and then our last strategy is just the idea of digital choice boards. So digital choice boards can come in a ton of different formats, and if you just Google this phrase, digital choice boards, you will come up with lots and lots of examples that are already created online, so nobody needs to reinvent the wheel for sure. If you are familiar with Bitmoji classrooms, which are really popular among teachers right now, that's really a fancy version of a digital choice board, which just means that it's a slide, and it can be a Google slide, or it can also be done in PowerPoint. And when the student clicks or presses on one part of it, then it links to something new. So it could link to another page, or it could link to another slide within a presentation. And for students with more significant needs, these digital choice boards can represent visual choices. And those choices could be for lots of different ways that they are participating in a class lesson or a class activity during an online class meeting. The top right has just an example of maybe how they're going to complete a literacy activity. So all students might have the same choices: read a book, read with a friend, write a story. And for the student with more significant needs, they might be touching or learning to click on the choice that they're making. So that's part of the skills that they're developing. And then maybe all those students go into breakout rooms with the groups that made that same choice. The next one down on the right is maybe a student is selecting, given visual choices, how the class is going to do a greeting today. So we're all gonna try dabbing as our way that we're gonna start off our class session. The student can also help to determine some content for class. So maybe we're going to be using a fraction example, and we're going to give the student several different choices of things that can be divided up into smaller pieces that we're going to be then using in our fraction example. So they could have visual choices on a slide of things like pizzas, cookies, cakes, and the one that they choose is the one the teacher then uses for their examples throughout the rest of the class. So these choices can be provided to all students for options, or it could be something really specific or tailored to the student with more significant support needs for how they're going to participate or complete an activity. Digital choice boards can also be used for some communication support. So students can, we can make simple communication boards using PowerPoint or Google Slides in the absence of other higher tech tools. So, just more simple options to say, yes, no, I'm not sure, could also be a version of a digital choice board. So those skills are a lot of the same skills that we've been really targeting throughout all of these strategies. So certainly communication and literacy, expanding vocabulary, understanding the meaning represented by those different choices, focused on specific comprehension strategies related to those choices, and of course, self-determination by having some control over how the student will be completing the assignment. All right, so final thoughts. I wanted to also just pause for a moment and thank our community of practice group, because I introduced our specific speakers, but I also wanted to thank the entire group that helped to put together these strategies, which includes representatives from Chime Institute, from Wish Charter School, and Los Angeles Unified School District, all of whom are here in the Los Angeles area, as well as representatives from Culver City Unified School District and TLC Charter School, which is in Orange County. So I wanted to just thank all of our members who helped to put this together, in addition to our presenters. So just to wrap up, here are some things that we were thinking about just to keep in mind. So one is to have a plan. One of the hardest things about participation for students with more significant needs is when we don't know what the plan is ahead of time, because it's not going to be accessible if we're trying to do it on the spot. So making sure that all team members know that plan in advance, including caregivers. So we want to collaborate with those team members to figure out what strategies are that we're going to use. We might want to think about working with the speech language pathologist, occupational therapists to consider, are there specific communication goals or fine motor or access goals that we should be embedding within these strategies? Problem solving together with family members or caregivers to figure out what's going to work for them in terms of support for this participation. And to start small. We just gave, I was just looking at this list, and this is a pretty big list of ideas and strategies. That doesn't mean that we need to incorporate all of them. I'm hoping that as a participant that you might be able to find one or two of those strategies that you could start with, try it out and refine it, and figure out what's going to work for your specific students, and then build upon those from there. But there's no reason why we don't need to start with just one or two strategies per class session to make sure that those students have a way to participate without having it become overwhelming. And then finally, have fun. The purpose behind all of this is to promote more belonging, more engagement. So we hope that these ideas will be fun for you as a teacher or a support provider, and also fun for the kids and their families. All right, thank you very much, and thank you for watching.